Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of Tech Thursday, which is one of many very special live streams that are going on from OM System this week. Because, of course, it's World Photography Day on Saturday, so we're doing loads of stuff all throughout the week to celebrate that and hopefully keeping you inspired and entertained and educated along the way. This is Tech Thursday, so as always, you can ask any of your tech questions in the comments. Feel free to put all of those challenges and troubles in there that you feel like you might want solving. Give us a wave, say hi. There's already loads of people in here. I noticed that a certain Mr. Ethan Beckler was in here an hour ago. That's dedication, Ethan, so I really appreciate that. Good to see you all, and obviously I can't say hello to everybody, but I am very, very glad that you're here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is David, and I'm one of the tech experts here at OM System, one of many excellent tech experts around the world. Today alone, we've had 3 live stream starts in different regions and different languages. So if English isn't your native language and you'd prefer to find something that you feel more comfortable with, please have a look at the live playlists, and you'll see all of our excellent colleagues doing things in different languages around the world. So speaking of around the world, everybody that's saying hello seems to be from all over the place. This is fantastic. We've got people from Wales. We've got people from the US, from Poland. Fantastic. Australia. John is another one. Hardcore John in Australia, where it's 4 a.m. in the morning. So we appreciate your attendance, John. Thank you so much for sitting in at that time in the morning. Now, of course, my Tech Thursday special for World Photography Day is all about the magic of macro. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of a refresher on the now 3 macro lenses that we have in the system. So we're going to have a little look at them. We've looked back at them in the past, but I think we're just going to have another little look over them, answer some of your questions. And of course, they don't have to be macro questions. You can ask any other tech questions, and I'll do my very best to answer it. I have most of the models with me, so I can kind of chop around and show you different things. But I'm also going to do a demonstration today on the 90mm macro with the OM1 combined with OM capture. So it all kind of rolls in, and we'll see things on a tiny microscopic level, hopefully. And I've got an interesting subject that has a nice little story to it as well. So first things first, before we dive into one of these slideshows where I tell you all the geeky, nerdy stuff about lenses and cameras, let's have a quick look at whether or not we've got some questions in already. Let's see. Here we go. This is a great one, actually, from Ethan. So I'm going to pop Ethan's question up here. Who's asked, good sir, I was such a polite, very distinguished gentleman, Mr. Beckler. Could we possibly see an update to OM capture software so that it can focus bracket high resolution images for later focus stacking? That is a great question, and also a great want, because I think that you probably do the same thing as me. I think I've seen some of your stuff where you may have done the same thing that I've done, and that's where we've manually micro focused in high res using OM capture's micro focus adjustment, which is great. But yes, to have a more automated feature is something that would be absolutely fantastic. So I'll put it into the feedback pot, Ethan, for sure. Obviously, we're always developing our software and our products, and it all comes via the feedback that you all give us. So it's really, really important to keep giving us those kind of wants and needs and things like that. Keep it realistic, you know. There's a limit to what we can produce at the moment, but we are always trying to make it better. So yes, Ethan, I am going to put that into the pot for you. Thank you so much for having the first question. Okay, so we'll do another one as well. Let's talk to Jeff. Jeff, thanks for joining us. You're new to macro and you want to get the whole image in focus. Well, this is sort of what Ethan and I were just talking about with Ethan's question. So we use a technique called focus stacking in order to get everything in focus in macro, because inherently, as part of the challenge within macro, is that you get a very shallow depth of field. Only a small amount of the subject's kind of area will be in focus in terms of the depth from you away towards infinity. So, and that's quite natural. The smaller we go, the more magnified we go, then the shallower the depth of field becomes, particularly if you're shooting wide open on, for example, say a 60mm 2.8 lens. If you're shooting at 2.8, it's very narrow. So we use focus stacking, whereby we either do this 2 ways. There's an in-camera version, which we can use up to 15 shots, say on a 1 series camera, where the camera will automatically focus at 15 different points throughout the depth of the subject, and then it'll stack them all together for you and produce a JPEG. leaving you with raw files if you did wish to do something with them yourself afterwards. Or of course, if 15 images isn't enough, if you're really heavily magnifying, like say, for example, you're using the 90mm macro at super macro with a 2x converter, then the depth of field that you're seeing on each image, you'd be lucky if you're touching a millimeter's worth of depth of field on each one. So you might need 40, 50, maybe a couple of hundred images, in which case you can use the second function in these cameras, which most of them have now, with the exception of the 10 series, and that's focus bracketing, whereby the camera can take up to 999 images, focusing at different points throughout the image from 1 point to infinity, but it doesn't do anything with them. So then you need to have some skills in post-edit to put them together. So that's how you're going to do it, Jeff. But there's so much more to macro than stacking, so enjoy your journey into it. Let's have a little look. Hi from people in Ontario and Canada. Hey, Dennis, how you doing? I'll throw in a couple of hellos as I go through for the questions here. This is a great one from Todd. Okay, so Todd has asked if there are any plans for putting together guidance for focus differential with the 90mm. Well, we kind of do already sort of have some guidance, and I've pointed to it. It's one of my nerd sheets that I pointed to in the presentation that I did on the 90mm. So it kind of gives us an idea of how much depth of field we're going to get in each image. The problem with guidance is that it really is very, very simple guidance, because the depth of field challenge will vary depending on the distance to subject, the aperture rating, and things like that. And to put all those together into a sheet and then issue it as an official document is quite tricky. But it's something that we're constantly thinking about. So we will always try to publish what we have. And it's something that I like to make sure people see as well there, Todd. But great question. Okie dokie, one more. And then I'm going to start looking at these 3 lenses for you. By the way, it's very, very warm here in sunny Cambridgeshire in the UK. I think my office has peaked at about 28 degrees Celsius today. It's lovely, beautiful. I did notice that somebody said it was quite dull in mid-beds, which isn't that far away. But I hope the weather is pleasing wherever you are in the world. Okay, here's a good one from Graham. We'll do this one, and then we'll move on to looking at these lenses. So Graham is asking if in-camera focus stacking doesn't work, is it worth looking at the images captured to see if a subset will focus stack in post-process? Yes, absolutely. So what I've also noticed is that occasionally, if a focus stack fails, the camera may actually produce a stack. If it gets enough images, it may produce a stack out of less images and takes away the misaligned ones, very rarely, because there needs to be a certain amount of data to do that. But it is definitely worth looking at the other images. What you've got to remember is that the way that an in-camera focus stacking function features is very different to, say, perhaps the algorithms that run a designated stacking software such as Helicon Focus. So I would always say, if you've got a few images that have been taken but the stacks failed for whatever reason, it may be that 1 or 2 of them are wildly out of alignment, but then, you know, the other 13 are absolutely fine. Then definitely try looking at it in post-process, Graham. So yeah, you raise a great point. Fantastic. Okay, let's have a look. I'm just going to answer this one, though. I've got to go for this one. S. Harms, why can't I connect 2 cameras on one phone? Yeah, I feel you. We're asking. I promise we're asking. We will continue to ask on your behalf as well. Okay. Okay, let's look at this. Right. There they are. The glorious trio, the 3 lovely macro lenses that we have here at OM System, stemming back to obviously the Olympus products right the way through to our 90mm macro. And as things go, rebranding will happen. So if you're lucky enough, soon enough, if you buy one of the previous ones, it might have an OM System brand on it. Right, so basically this is what we've got. We've got the 60mm, the 90mm, and the 30mm. Interesting how I only realized the other day when I was speaking with one of our customers that we had this these lenses of thirds, 30, 60, 90. Glaringly obvious when you think about it, but it only just occurred to me the other day. So let's talk about that 60mm macro lens. And we're just going to briefly touch on these, couple of slides on each, and then we'll look at some images and sort of pull them apart and have a think about what happened in those images. And then we can kind of take a look at this demo. And we've got to try and squeeze all that into the next kind of 50 minutes. Okay, so we will see how that goes. So in the 60, obviously, we've got a 120 millimeter field of view. And if there are any mistakes on this, I do apologize. I've gone through it a little bit, but you know, as I get older, my eyesight's terrible. I'm staring at a really small copy of it here. It's 120 millimeter field of view crop equivalent. Okay, so really important to know that that is the crop equivalent. With a maximum aperture of f2.8, so nice and bright if you want to get all that light in there, but obviously you have to bear in mind that challenge of macro, where the wider you have your aperture, then the narrower depth of field you're going to get. And then your minimum aperture of f22, which is the same for pretty much all of the OM system Olympus lenses, with the exception of the f1.2 range, which has a minimum aperture of f16. So 13 elements in 10 groups. That's the nerdy stuff. The extra low dispersion lenses, the high refractive lenses, and then the extra low coated high refractive lens as well. And a one-to-one magnification ratio. So 1 times magnification, full reproduction, 1-to-1. So that's life size in the image, as if you'd place the object directly onto the sensor. It would be reproduced at the same size and magnification, fully weather sealed, 7 blades, with a 46mm filter, and tiny. It's 185 grams. It's really, really small for what it does. It is a brilliant piece of kit. Now, of course, it's got all the very high technical stuff inside. So you've got a floating inner focusing system in there, which is really nice. It runs on 3 drives, and you've got that zero coating, which is our M.Zuiko extra low dispersion coating. So we're doing this to prevent things like flares and aberrations and things like that. And a quiet MSC. MSC stands for movie and stills compatible. You might see it on a lot of our lenses, but it simply means that it's silent focusing, so that you don't get any background noise on movies. And those little red rings in there are showing you where the gaskets are for the weather sealing within this camera. And a nice little kind of cut through view, so you can see exactly how many elements are working away in there. Now, I want to show you a couple of images from that lens. So this one, obviously, quite obviously, is an ant. This is an important image in terms of something that I'll show you later on. So I've got a comparison later on to show you the difference between what 1-to-1 ratio will get you, because this was shot on the 60mm at 1-to-1, so full life size, 1 times magnification. And then I'm going to compare that to what happens if you go to 2-to-1, and you can sort of see the difference and make those comparisons if you don't already know that. So this is a lovely ant. There's a local nature reserve. Here, this was a tree stump where a tree had been damaged in a storm, so he cut down the dangerous part that was completely cracked out, and some ants made their home in the tree stump, and they were just digging out wood, bringing it to the surface, and chucking it away. So this was really cool to watch. I did get bitten whilst taking this one because I was leaning on the tree stump, and they were quite adamant that they didn't want me there, but it was a really, really nice opportunity. And this was shot with a flash as well, so I used the for this one, this was shot with the FL700WR flash and a Cygnus Tech diffuser. So you've got that really nice soft wraparound light. I use that a lot. I would say 90% of shooting with any of these macro lenses when I shoot with them is with flash and a diffuser or the STF8, depending on what I'm shooting. Usually with the 30mm with the STF8, to be honest with you, because that's got some interesting capabilities all of its own, which we'll come on to. So this is also on the 60mm with flash and diffuser. This is a focus stack, an in-camera focus stack. And it's not actually even a 15 images, because I took this image before we had the 15 image limit. This is back when we had an 8 image limit. And it's all stacked in camera, and that's the JPEG output. So it gives a really nice sort of feel to it with the water. You get that depth. And a single shot of this, barely the edge of one of those petals was in focus. So really, really useful tool for in-camera stacking. This is a single shot, no stacking here. This is a crane fly hiding in the grass. This is in the middle of the day as well. Bright sunshine, very sunny day. But because of the flash overpowering the sun in this particular instance, you get a really nice separation of a black background. Now, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I completely understand that not everybody likes that kind of black background separation and isolation. But I think in this instance, it works quite well, and it makes this creepy-looking crane fly actually look quite nice with the green eyes matching with that small amount of grass that's out of focus in the background. Again, all 60mm macros for this one. And then this, which is a non-flash image. So this is just the 60mm on a camera. This is actually an opportunist photograph that I took. I was eating my lunch, to be honest with you. it's perched on an apple, which was going to be the rest of my lunch. It wasn't afterwards. But I just had the camera next to me with the 60mm macro on and saw the fly land on the apple and just decided to take an opportunity and shot it in portrait as well, which we don't do often enough. I think we've got to switch it up when shooting nature. And this one's really, really nice. And that's just a single shot. So this would be without a flash on there. My go-to settings for the 60mm macro are about f5.6 because I personally believe it's the sharpest point in the whole range in terms of clarity. And then, if you're shooting in reasonably good lighting conditions, you don't need to go any wider. f5.6 gives you just enough depth of field then on a subject this small. This is obviously not one-to-one reproduction. It's slightly less. So this is probably about 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3. Okay. So before I go and move on to that, let's just sit and wait for the 30mm for a second. I'm just going to try and go back through some of these questions. Remember, there's just me here now, so I'm trying to pick out questions and talk at the same time. Let's see what we've got. Guy wants me to comment on achieving higher depth of field. Besides using smaller apertures, using the 90mm macro lens at very close differences, is stacking the best solution? So yeah, so what you've got to remember is with the 90, you've got, it's 180mm of lens, effectively, the crop equivalent. And that sort of telephoto compression is really going to shrink that depth of field. Now, then you add on possibly shooting at 1 or 2 times magnification, and that's going to get even smaller. Stacking is the best solution because even though I'm quite happy on the on this lens alone rather than any other lens in the range, I'm quite happy going to f10 or f11. In other lenses, I would max it at f8 really for quality purposes. But the 90mm was designed knowing full well that you would really struggle to get any sort of depth of field with this compression and magnification going on. So it was designed to work exceptionally well at sort of f9, f10, f11, those areas. I wouldn't really go above it. You probably can if you're happy to do a bit of work, but it'll be noticeable when you start to see things like diffraction beyond that. So with the 90, you can f10, f11. You should stack and even maybe stack at f10 and f11 as well to give you some better results. And when I do the demonstration just over here, we'll try and have a little look at how that will work as well. But thanks for your great question. Okay, so Steve saying you've got problems focus stacking handheld as it keeps failing. Any tips to overcome this without using a tripod? It varies wildly from person to person how well somebody can handhold a camera. Some people naturally are very still, annoyingly still. And some people have more handshake, and some people have conditions that cause them to have a tremor of some sort. So it's really sort of widely spread about how easy it is to do that. But you definitely need to think about your posture. You need to think about your breathing. You should never hold your breath, because if you hold your breath, your body shakes. You should always push your breath out and leave it out to take the shot. So on an out breath rather than a holding your breath, and keep yourself nice and tight and centered like that. It's very difficult to give you any more advice than that, Steve, as it does vary massively. But I would say, Steve, knowing you as I do, make sure you don't have the dog lead attached to your hand whilst you're trying to focus, because this kind of thing can happen with those pups. So hand the lead over to someone else. Thanks for your question, Steve. Good to see you in here. Okie dokie. Right, let's see. Mike, just going to tackle this one. Mike would love to be able to choose to start focus at the closest point for in-camera focus stacking rather than part way in, then jumping back. Sadly, I find it often doesn't jump forward enough. Okay, to completely understand you need for that. We are, however, using that initial part way in as a reference point for the final crop. So it helps to align those images. But again, it's one of feedback that we always put in. So we'll see if there's anything that they can do about the way that functions. Perhaps it's something they'll tackle in the future. Good. Okay. It's 28 degrees in here, guys. I'm so sorry if I start sweating, looking absolutely disgraceful on camera. My apologies in advance. Right. Let's go and have a little look at this 30mm macro. So there it is. The 30mm is a 60mm field of view crop equivalent. Teeny tiny lens. It's brilliant. This one's very, very small. This has a maximum aperture of f3.5, obviously, and again, a minimum of f22. And this also has the closest focusing of any of our lenses outside of a tough camera, which is approximately working distance is about one centimeter, about 10 millimeters from the front element. So really, really close. Hence why this is a lens that I would more often use with the STF8 flash. Now, somebody did mention the STF8 flash in the questions and asked if I'll be talking about it a little bit more. I haven't got a demonstration with the STF8 flash, but what I would say is that when you are using the STF8 flash, you can really trust the TTL kind of auto flash option on there, unless you go to stacking in camera, because that doesn't allow TTL flash. So you've got two little dials on there, one dial on the left, which covers your TTL or RC, which is auto flash. And then you can turn it round to go through the manual power outputs all the way down on the left dial. On the right dial, it is simply about distributing the light more towards head A or more towards head B, or completely singling out head A for B or singling out B for A. And that's what that second dial does. It's nice and simple. And then all you've got to do is just work on the angle of those heads, because they swivel around those connecting rings. Now, obviously, if you're shooting something really, really shiny, that can be a challenge, because you've got two small diffusers that clip onto the STF8's heads, but they're very close to the light. So you can get kind of hot specular highlight points on very, very shiny things. But I tend to use the STF8 on textures, barks, material textiles, things like that. Also things that don't move, because I'm shooting with a 30 and you're sort of right on top of that subject. We'll show you some of the images at the end of this. So whoever it was asking about the STF8, trust it in auto and it'll do a very, very good job. But this is the lens that I would use with that setup. 7 elements, 7 nerdy elements in 6 groups, high-speed imager AF, so really, really nice and quick to focus, 7 blades, same filter size as the 60 millimeters. So if you're using the STF8, you're using that 46 millimeter adaptation ring, you can use that across both lenses. Teeny tiny, 128 grams in weight, absolutely nothing to it. But interestingly, this lens has a maximum. It was the first lens in our lineup that went over 2 times magnification. Well, it went over 1 times magnification before the 90 millimeter came along. It has a maximum image magnification of 2.5 times, which is brilliant. Sadly, you need to be 1 centimeter away from the subject to achieve 2.5 times. But as you can see in the image, it's excellent for mechanical things, for coins, for crystalline items, for textures. Really, 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 really superb. And I can't recommend it enough for that pure reproduction value and quality. And of course, all of these lenses that we're talking about today are compatible with focus bracketing and focus stacking. So you won't have any problems with those either. Now, this is one on the 30 millimeter macro. Again, it's really lovely because it is still, it's not a moving subject. If you take the wind away, but it's not live, it's not shuffling around. So really, really nice to use for the 30 millimeter. Then, however, you can use it a little bit further away. So the flexibility of these macro lenses is they're not just going to stop focusing the minute you move slightly further away. They're going to give you lots and lots of flexibility. So you can take some great images like this. And when I talked about texture, this is one of my favorite images. This is an image that I took of a dried flower, a dead dried flower, you know, that kind of winter, autumn season. And the textures that come out when these when this flora dries up is absolutely fantastic. And the 30 millimeter, superb for getting that nice crop, that nice field of view, and be able to get real close if you want to as well. Good. Okay. Right. Let's pop the 90 mil back in the pocket for a second before we move on to that one. And let's see. Oh, this is a fantastic question. I'm so glad, Evan, that you brought this up. Evan's talking about the Raynox DCR 250 2.5 times super macro lens with the 90 millimeter macro. This is a conversation that Ethan and I talked about when the 90 millimeter first came out, and it's a combination of adding the Raynox really does start to scupper the quality of that 90 millimeter lens. Yes, it's going to get you super close, but you're going to have no depth of field. You're going to have real fuzzy images, and it's just not worth even trying. The Raynox is perfect on things like the 60 millimeter macro. I used it myself. Again, Ethan will have used them a lot on his stuff. If you go and head over to One of One on Instagram, I believe. Is it One of One, Ethan, on Instagram? You'll be able to see a combination of the stuff that Ethan's taken with the 60 and the Raynox. In fact, he said just down here that the 90 will not work with Raynox filters, not to any discernible value at all, no. So I would say no. It's got a lot going for it already, and adding that extra on just takes it away, takes all the magic away. Okay, I'm going to have a little look at this one. John, it's what now? Nearly 4:30 in the morning. Crikey. I do appreciate it. John's asking, what is a good f-stop to use in focus stacking? And does the lower f-stop produce a more detailed outcome using an OM1 Mark II? You want to pass one of those my way? I haven't seen an OM1 Mark II. I think we know John means an EM1 Mark II, and with a 60mm macro. Now, it's really important to understand the best aperture ranges for quality, okay? So you can shoot at f/22 and get lots more depth of field, but your images will be muddy, soft, diffracted. They won't be the best quality. So generally speaking, the 60 and the 30, I would use, you can use them wide open. You shouldn't have many problems in terms of quality, but in terms of getting a little bit more depth of field, a little bit more detail, f5.6 is the best place for sharpness on both of those lenses. If you're using a flash or working with a flash add-on with your camera, you can push that to f8 to get a little bit more depth of field, but the flash is providing the light, so you don't need to worry about that narrower aperture. And generally speaking, on those lenses, I wouldn't go above f8, but yes, using that narrower f-stop is going to give you more detail to a point, and then you start, it's almost like you put all the magic in, and then if you add more magic, it actually isn't magic anymore. It takes it away from it. So great question. Let's have a look. Vermis was wondering about MSC. So for those that missed it, MSC is written on pretty much all of our lenses, movie and stills compatible. So nice silent focusing for your videos. Let's see. So Steve wants to know which flash and diffuser did I mention? Well, I use obviously the Olympus flashes. I have an FL900 flash, and I also have an FL700WR, which is my preference for a number of reasons. The FL700WR is a little bit smaller, so it's all about mobility really, but not a lot less powerful than the FL900, so I'm not really compromising too much on the power output, but it's also sublimely easy to use. The FL700, really nice menu, really easy operation, and it has wireless transmitter and receiver built into it, so radio receiver built in, so you could either have more than one FL700 and dot them around and they'll talk to each other quite happily, or you can get our commanders as well to trigger them off camera. We make a commander called the FRWC, I think, and we do a receiver as well, which is the FRWR, which can go on to things like the FL900, which doesn't have the transmission built in. So, but FL700WR is my preference of flash on top when I'm not using the STF8, and I combine that with a diffuser made by a really nice guy over in Australia called Brendan, who makes the Cygnus Tech diffuser, and I'm sure loads of people in the room will give thumbs up for Cygnus Tech diffuser because it's a brilliant design and creates really nice soft light from your flash, which is important. Okay, so it's about combining everything that you can to get this best quality. You get the best lenses, you get the best sensor, you get the best flash, or the most appropriately behaving flash, and then you get a diffuser to manipulate that light. That's how it all works quite nicely. Okay, one more, and then we'll go and look at the 90. There's some funny comments in these chats. I do love it when you all chat amongst yourself. Right, let's have a quick look. Jorge has asked, when focus stacking and bracketing, is it best to shoot in manual or is it better to shoot in A or S? Now, this is a question where I would say it's better to shoot in the mode that you're most confident. But remember that if you shoot in S, you may not get the aperture value that you want because the camera's choosing. And if you're shooting A, you may not get the shutter value that you want because the camera's choosing. So I would always recommend, if you're confident, to shoot in manual. And if you're not confident, don't worry. It's not, everybody has to build up to shooting in different modes. And even people that are confident in manual still choose to shoot in A or S. If you want to do some more training on things like learning all about exposure in manual, then once a month, if you go over to the OMDS events page, so OMDS events, just Google it, top search, top result. Then we put loads of events on there, different regional languages and different subject matters. And once a month, I do a beginner's guide to the exposure triangle. And if it's something that you want to learn more about, feel free to drop into there. But if you're already experienced, Go manual. Yeah, fly in there. Do it all. Tell the camera what you want. Thank you for your question. Okay. Right. Oh, and I'm just going to say hello to the wild photographer, Mr. Nick Wilcox Brown, who is one of our ambassador team. Great to see you in here, Nick, as well. Thanks for stopping by. Ethan's popped his Instagram page up for you. If you search one-of-one images on the many platforms, Ethan will be over there with lots of different images taken with kit throughout the years. Right. Let's see these. I'm just going to pop this up from Steve saying these are so helpful. I'm going to screenshot that and send to our bosses to make sure that we can still carry on doing these. So thanks, Steve. That's brilliant. Right. Let's have a little look at the 90mm. Oh, now it's just gorgeous, isn't it? I mean, we waited so long for this. It's absolutely beautiful. The 90mm is not 120mm field of view. Can you see that mistake that I made there straight away? The 90 is 180mm. I can't even change this now. It's a PDF page. I'll change it later. So don't, if you're watching back now in the live or afterwards, that top line is wrong. The 90mm is not 120mm field of view at all. It is a 180mm field of view with a maximum aperture of f3.5, which caused some controversy when we first announced it, because a lot of people didn't like the fact that we'd not made it an f2.8 or an f2 lens, you know. But the problem is, even at f3.5, yes, we get loads of light in, but there is zero depth of field. There's nothing, so you've got to stop down anyway. We're primarily using f8, f9, f10, f11, those kind of areas to get any depth of field. To the f3.5 part of it, unless you're shooting far off, further off the macro, it's kind of a no-brainer really that it doesn't really matter on that one. Up to 2 times magnification in lens, or up to 4 times by adding the MC20 teleconverter. You can add the 1.4, the MC14, but obviously I always talk about the maximum extreme ends, which is going to be the MC20. You got your high-speed focusing system, which is MSC, built-in IS on this lens. So it's the only macro lens that has the built-in IS, and that will synchronize IS with compatible bodies. So the later 5 series, OM5, the 1 series of cameras, EM1 and OM1. So they're all compatible. The filter size on this one is a 62mm filter, which is the same as the 12-40 Pro lens, actually, interestingly. But important because if you buy the STF8, or you've already bought the STF8 and you're wondering, oh, I wonder if I should get a 90mm, do they sell a ring? The 62mm ring was always in the STF8 bag for you, always there. It's almost as though when we produced the STF8 years ago, we knew that this was coming. So you've got a ring adapter to hold the STF8 onto the 90mm lens as well. And then you're looking at this one is the biggest of the lenses because it is a metal build, magnesium alloy. So it could be heavier if we didn't make it out of mag alloy, but it's 453 grams. But for a weather sealed lens, it feels lighter when you get your hands on it. I know there are some people in the chat that have said that it is heavy. I think it's a subjective. I mean, I don't think it's that heavy in comparison to what it could be. So that's our 90mm. You've got some lovely switches on there, really nice limit switches, so you know exactly where you're going from full range, 5 meters to infinity, 0.25 to 5 meters for close-up and up to 1-to-1 reproduction, and then S macro, which will enable you to use the up to 2 times magnification. And if you pull back the focus clutch on there, because it has got a manual focus clutch to pull back like a lot of the other Pro lenses, it exposes the data underneath, the details of focusing distances, but also tells you where the focus ring needs to be to get 2 times and 1 times magnification. So super good. And you've got your IS switch for on and off. Trust me, leave it on. 180mm equivalent of telephoto prime lens needs the IS. You've got a lens function button which you can program, and you could have something like focus peaking on there so that you can better see your manual focusing. You could have focus stacking or bracketing on there. And then, of course, you've got your focus ring as well. So 4 times the magnification, if you compare that to the 60mm, and if you put them both in the same position, that's the focusing distance that we're getting at those magnifications as well. So you're getting closer focusing, closer working distance, and more magnification. That all just screams amazing to me. Can you tell that I love this lens? It's fantastic. And there's some examples now of this 90mm, how close we can really get. I'm a natural gardener. I'm a very I'm a very earthy gardener, and by saying that, I mean I just let the garden do what it wants. I don't actually garden it. I just let nature take over. And then every now and again, when my neighbor shouts at me because the lawn needs mowing, I'll mow the lawn. So we have some trees that, do have some fairly heavy infestations of black fly and aphids and things like that. But they're great subject matter, really, really close up as well. So this is 90mm macro. This one is natural light, which works very nicely. This one is with the FL700 and diffuser on there as well. So the aphids were working away there. And then this is another one of the ants in the cut down tree stand. We saw one earlier from the 60mm macro at a 1:1 ratio. This is now a 2:1 ratio. So the reason that I've put this back in here as well is because then I can show you the comparison. So the next slide here is showing you the size difference of these ants when shot at 2:1 or 1:1. So the one on the left here is the 90mm macro shot at 2:1 magnification, and the one on the right on the 60 shot at 1:1. So that's the size difference that extra 1 times magnification gives you on top of it, which is loads of fun as well. So there we go. That is the recap on those 3 lenses, the amazing macro trio that we've got there. In a second, we're going to go over to my demonstration with OM Capture and the 90mm macro lens. We've got a little bit of time left in the session. So for the next 25 minutes, get as many questions in as you can. And I will try and answer them as I do the demo as well. Okay. So Penny, this is a great question. Will you discuss the 12 to 50 3.5 EZ with macro? It's a discontinued lens, Penny. I don't want to talk about it and make all those people want it, and they can't buy it unless they get it, unless they're lucky and get one in the used market. But what a phenomenal lens it was, actually. It was a kit lens for the EM5 Mark 1. Just an absolutely fantastic lens, all around 12 to 50 zoom with a macro clutch. Yeah, button pressing macro clutch system. Phenomenal bit of kit, but sadly discontinued. Okay. What else have we got? Let's see. This is a great one. Mike, how far can you push the ISO when focus bracketing without losing quality? So this is also kind of personal opinion and subjective, and it depends on the post edit as well. I can only give you my personal thoughts on it. And I personally, on an OM1, because that's the camera that I'm using now, I would personally let that run up probably to about 12,800. And then I'd be happy just doing a little bit of tweaking at the end if I had to. But then my workflow is slightly interesting in the sense that for my higher ISO images, what I'll tend to do is I will open all of my high ISO images in Olympus, in OM System. You see, it's been 2.5 years and I'm still saying Olympus. In OM System Workspace, and in OM Workspace, I will open them up, do no editing, but I'll straight in-out export them as 16-bit TIFF files, which helps deal with the noise, initial noise, because OM Workspace deals with it very, very well. And then I'll pop those TIFFs over to Lightroom or another editing software and finish them off in there. That's my personal workflow. A lot of people do it. Some people don't. Some people use Topaz, things like that, extra denoising software. Lightroom's got its own very good denoising function now since the last update. So personally, and I can only tell you personally, 12,800 is probably the max that I would want to go to, unless I was shooting the Loch Ness Monster, and then I will go the whole hog if I have to, just to get a picture of Nessie. But thanks for your question. Okay, Andrew, any tips for the right focus differential? Is it just a question of trial and error? Are there any suggestions or tips for perfecting the right overall depth of field? Now, this is a great question because the focus differential works on a scale from 1 to 10. Okay, 1 being a very narrow differential, and by narrow differential, that simply means the distance between where point A is the focus and then point B and then point C, etc. So it's the distance between the jumps that the camera focuses on going towards infinity, so to speak. Now that changes depending on how many images you're taking, the compression of the lens that you've got, so what focal length it is, the distance to the subject. So for example, the closer you are, the narrower each frame will be in terms of depth of field, and you'll want a smaller focus differential, because if you have a big focus differential and it makes these hopping mighty great jumps between the areas where it focuses, then if your aperture is not giving you enough depth of field, there'll be blurred lines where each one of those frames doesn't cross over in terms of depth of field. So the closer you are, the more you magnify, the smaller the differential you need to be. The further away you are, the less magnified you are, the less differential you need to be. If you're going to do standard in-camera stacking, 15 shots on the 60mm macro without any additional magnification options or anything else like that, generally speaking, a focus differential of 5, which is where the camera defaults to, is good enough. And then if you're going to go to bracketing and say to take 50 images, then you're probably going to want to turn the differential down to about 3 or 2. More images, less differential. It's tricky though, and sometimes it is a matter of experience and working things out. Okay, so let me see one more, and then we will go to our demonstration. Bill, great question. What happens if I use extension tubes with a macro lens? Does it result in higher magnification? It'll result in slightly higher magnification, but more importantly, it reduces your working distance so you can focus closer. But by doing that, you lose infinity focus. So the camera is then unable to focus at infinity, but it can focus maybe if the working distance was 9 centimeters, you can pop some extension tubes on, and that working distance might become 6 centimeters. So you can get closer, which, you know, effectively, yes, does provide more coverage rather than magnification. But yeah, extension tubes, yeah, pick a good brand, good quality brand, and they'll do great things for you. Right, let's see if I can press some buttons. I'm going to switch my camera on, which is over here. And then I'm going to be using OM Capture. So I'm just selecting PC connection / raw control when I switch it on the back screen. That's the options that come through. And then hopefully if we pop over to here, we should be, oh, wow, things are working. Honestly, normally I mess this up. There's still time. There's 18 minutes worth of mess up time possibly available. Right. So I've got a subject in here. What I've got in here, actually, really interestingly, I said there was a little story behind it. It's the school holidays where we are. My girls need constant activities. So one of the days in the needs of constant activities, we grew crystals, which is brilliant. It's fantastic. It's very easy. The problem is there isn't an instant result. So the kids got a bit bored, but, you know, 8 days later, there were some crystals growing in a grotty little pot on our kitchen windowsill. So these crystals, they're quite cool when we look at them in macro. So we're now going to be shooting them at 2 times, or just less than 2 times magnification on the OM1 and the 90mm macro lens. Now, first things first, it's a bit dark in there. Okay, so can't really see much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use OM Capture to turn on night LV, which is like live boost on previous models and things like that. And it looks a little bit blue at the moment. The reason it looks blue is because of all these lights back here. But I've got a flash. So when we take a shot, despite the fact that the crystals are blue anyway, it's going to take a lot of that away. So don't worry too much about those. Now then, one of the really, really difficult things in macro is focusing and you know, getting the right depth, position that you want to focus on to then get correct depth of field. Now it's really easy with OM Capture because you can use these kind of micro focusing options. So if the camera is in manual focus, then I can use these little micro focusing options to focus at different points through the image. Really easy. Now these lots of arrows is big jumps, middle jumps, tiny jumps. Okay, so if I get roughly where I want to be. Now, interestingly, I focused on this part of this crystal earlier because it kind of looks like a little snail. It doesn't at the moment, but it kind of does when we light it with a flash. So I'm going to focus on that, bring that there, and then just a tiny little bit. There we go, just to bring this in. Well, it might be about there. Okay. So also what I want to show you is that I'm at 250th of a second in terms of my shutter speed here, because that's the maximum I can sync with flash when not working with high speed flash. And then I'm shooting at f11 because this single image, the field of view that you're seeing there is about, I would say 9-10 millimeters across, roughly 9 or 10 millimeters across, a little bit less. So on the 90mm, because of the compression that causes at 2 times magnification, very narrow depth of field. If I was to select here, in fact, I can't even select f3.5 because we're in super macro, which means that you have to start at f5 because the lens is just not going to be able to give you anything at f3.5. If I was to take an f5 shot here, it's such a slither of depth of field, we wouldn't see anything. Everything would be beautifully soft and out of focus. It'd be a really nice abstract image. But f11, I'm not going to go over f11 today. We have successfully used f16. I'm going to try and stick at f11, and then we'll stack some. We might even do a high res shot as well. So everything else on auto ISO, it's going to give me 200 automatically because it detects that the flash is part of the system. Auto white balance. My flash here is set to fill in. That's all it is. Fill in flash, which is going to give me TTL. The flash itself is in TTL mode. So the camera is looking at the scene and going, hey, flash, you need this much power. Flash goes, no problem, buddy. I got you. It's that simple. And it happens instantly. So let's stop messing around and take a picture. Here we go. Oh, do you know what would help if I turned the flash on? So never a dull day if you don't mess up. Let's see. We'll have that in. Oops, and then in TTL. Here we go. Now we'll see a little preview down here in the rec preview window, but that's not that big. So let me bring a bigger one up here. Let's see. There we go. So this is the image that we've just taken, okay? Super narrow depth of field. Look, he looks like a little snail, and that's his head and his shell. If I'm trying to, if I have to explain it, you can't see it. It's just me, don't worry. So this is it. Super shallow depth of field, but oh my goodness, look at the quality in that area that's in focus. It's absolutely superb. It's crisp, it's beautiful, and this crystalline kind of area just really shouts quality and detail. Like down here, you can see all that growth in the crystal. I'm quite proud that we grew this crystal as well. So that's a single shot. Okay, let me get rid of that. Let's focus somewhere else in the background. Okay, so let's go further in and let's see exactly what. Oh, that's coming closer towards me. Let's go further away and see what we can get. So in the background, we will see different things. We're now creating a soft foreground. Okay, I'm going to go about there. I'll tell you about the shots. Processes that little image for us, that little preview, but that little preview isn't very high quality. So let's bring this one in here. Wow, it's just phenomenal. Look at the detail and quality that we're seeing in him. The nature isn't nature brilliant. It's something that only the people in the UK sadly will understand, or people that may have watched some of our television. But I have to say, in nature brilliant, because that's fantastic. Really superb. And again, super narrow depth of field. Unfortunately, that's the way that is, and that's f11. All right. So let's leave that up for a second and let's have a little look. Oh, brilliant stuff. Let's put this one up. From Deep, love the videos. Thank you for helping someone new who abandoned Canon and moved to OM Systems. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say you are so welcome within our photographic community. Thank you very much. Okay, let's scroll through some of these comments and see if we can. And again, I'm sorry if I don't get your question. It's not because I don't want to. It's just that I kind of like scroll through and I try and grab ones that I can. But if your question doesn't get answered, please feel free. Once the live ends, the video becomes a standing video, and you can go into the comments, the forever comments in the video, not the live chat comments, and you can re-put your question in. And over the next couple of days, I'll do my best to answer them as well. Right, so let's see. Marcia. Hi, Marcia. Currently, you own the discontinued FL600R. Oh, no, it was a great flash. What am I missing by not upgrading to the 700WR of the EM1 Mark II and the 90mm macro? So what you're missing is the ability to use multi-shot. So a multi-burst, if you need to use sequential burst mode and go flash, 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 flash. That's something that you'll get extra if you go to 700. You then also get that built-in wireless communication. So the transmitters that are built into the flash, if you decided you wanted to get a trigger or another flash and they wanted to talk to each other. You also get a really simplified way of using it as well. So the FL700, I mean, I don't want to say bad things about the 600R because, you know, that was a good flash. But the 700WR is very easy to use as well, Marcia. Okay, so let's look for another one. Here we go. Kuchin Pappy, for non-macro use, where would you use the lens as a prime? The 90 and the 60 are both excellent portrait lenses. So you get really nice long compression for portraiture for people on those lenses as well. And you'll say, well, the 90 is only f3.5. Trust me, if you are at a distance where you can fit in a head and shoulders portrait on the 90mm at f3.5, you will be isolating the background, no problem. So portraiture is perfect for that one. Oh, look at that. I should really read ahead because Mr. Nick Wilcox Brown answered that question in exactly the same way as I did. Well, thanks, Nick. Let's see. Brian, will the diffuser be compatible with all 3 lenses? So the simple answer is no. The more complex answer is you can kind of make them, but it's not great for the equipment. The diffusers are designed to work with different lengths of lenses. Definitely not the 30. It's way too short. The one that you can get for the 60 does also kind of work for the 90, but you'd be damaging the diffuser. So it depends how much you want to spend on diffusers. Okay, one more, and we'll come back over to OM capture. Okay, I need to pick up this one because there's an official response to this. Corsairos, the tripod mount ring from the 40 to 150 f2.8 fits the 90mm macro perfectly. Was that deliberate? No, and we don't officially recommend that you do that because it's not actually designed for it. It's purely coincidental, and there are some aspects of scratching the lens, and there's also it's not designed to sit on there with a stopper, so there can be accidental problems with it. So as much as it works, if you do want to use it, hey, you know, it's your kit. You do exactly what you want to do. We can't officially approve it though. So be careful. Yeah, just be careful. Evan, do you use TTL all or most of the time? Yeah, I'm lazy. I'm so unbelievably lazy. The reason I use TTL, and I'll show you in this next shot actually, is because it's so easy to manipulate greater or less power. If I'm in a studio environment, or if I'm working with more than one flash in different areas, I'll use manual flash control. I'll tell the flash what I want, but in this scenario, TTL is absolutely perfect. So let me leave your question up, and then let's just take that down. So the reason I use TTL, so you just saw the image that we just took. It's in TTL. I'm going to say that it wasn't bright enough for me. So all I'm going to do is go to the flash compensation button here, which is on the camera, and I'm going to ask it to compensate 2/3 of a stop. So it's going to give me TTL plus 2/3 of a stop more power because I'm asking for it. And we take another shot, and then we'll come over and open that image here. So it's that simple to get a brighter image. This is the image with TTL plus 0.7 of a stop, and that's the one without. So you've got these two, same image, but just different brightness. And TTL is so easy to handle. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a flash compensation function. So you can just say, oh, give me 1/3 of a stop more, or give me 1/3 of a stop less, but still TTL. So yeah, Evan, that's exactly what I use all the time, and because I'm lazy. Okay, so let's pull that down. Let's take that away. Let's think it's a great shot, but I want more detail. Okay, let me just, oh, I'm clicking on the wrong screen because I'm reproducing screens here. I'm going to just bring that down to 1/3 of a stop actually. And I'm going to take another shot. I'm not going to look at it right now though. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to turn on the high res function, right? So let's turn on tripod based high res here. And what you'll see is that all those things popped up in yellow to say, you know, these are the things that I'm changing. So it's put it in silent mode. It's reduced my shutter speed to 1/100th of a second maximum. Now it does this because there's a flash attached. If you're using any sort of silent electronic shutter function, which is high res, bracketing, or silent mode itself, then the flash sync is a maximum of 1/100th of a second on an OM1. And on the previous OMDs, it's a 50th of a second. Okay, can't go any faster. You can go slower, but you can't go faster. It's purely in electronic mode so that you don't get half shutter lit shots, so half underexposed and half exposed. Okay, so we've got all those in place. And I also got the option here to choose whether I want 80 megapixel, 50 million pixel, or 25. We can click 80. I don't need the RAW for this demonstration, so just 80 million pixel, fine JPEG, and we're going to take a shot. Now, the camera's going to take several shots, and you'll see all the flashing going on behind me. So here we go. Flash, 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 flash. And actually, what I should have said then is that when you go into high res or when you go into focus stacking, I'm just going to check my images over here. Yeah, it's fine. The TTL function becomes manual, so you then have to manually input a power for the flash. So you can't use TTL with focus stacking, but you can use TTL with single shots. Okay, so let's see what we got there. Right, so just going to pull it. I have to remember which one's which now. So let's pull up. This is the non-high res. Looking here, very nice. Looks a little bit like Superman's Fortress of Solitude in there, doesn't it? For all the nerds out there. There we go. We got in a reference. And then this is the high res shot here, which has got much, much, much more detail around this area. So effectively, we're more than tripling the high res detail, which is fantastic. So again, single shots. Now, obviously, Ethan mentioned earlier, I really love to have high res focus stacking or bracketing at the same time. Me too. What you can do is slightly laborious, but still better than the old ways of doing things, is that you can focus in the starting position in high res, and then you can use these micro adjustments down here to just keep focusing throughout the scene and taking images in high res as you go, and then stack the high res images that way. A little bit longer winded, but it does work like that. So that's your high res. So let's turn high res off. Let's go to off here. Let's do a stack and see what we can get. Okay, so we'll just take one shot. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to bring it back to that little snail. So let's bring it back to the little snail, because that's closer to the closest working point. So click, click, click. There's my little snail. There he is. Quick shot. We'll have a quick look at that one. Here we go. And there he is. So nice. Narrow, shallow depth of field. He's not very happy, snail. That's a sad face. Really shallow depth of field. Let's see if we can make it bigger. Now, depending on where we start, depends on what we get in the image and how much bigger it gets. So let's get rid of that. I'm going to go to bracketing. The options are the same in OM Capture as they are in the cameras. Focus stacking is going to get switched on. We've got 15 images, and we'll use a focus differential of about 4 here. So less than the middle range of gaps between shots, right? So we'll close that. What you'll notice now is I've got this little box that's popped up. That's my framing box, because the final stacked JPEG will have a 7% crop. It'll be inside that box just there. All right. And I'm manually focusing. You can autofocus with focus stacking if you want, but you need to make sure that your manual focus clutch on your lens is pushed forward, so that clutch is not active. Otherwise, it won't let you do certain things. So we're starting here. It's going to come a little bit closer to us and then mostly further away. So I'm actually just going to take it a little bit further out to start it about there. And then let's go. Loads of flashing is going to happen. It's all going on back there. That's taking the 15 shots. Now, how quick that happens depends on 2 things. What shutter speed you've set. Obviously, this is a maximum of 100th of a second. I have to just check my lighting for my flash. It looks fine. And also how good the batteries are in the flash. If the flash batteries are draining and it's going to take longer to recycle in between, that process can take some time. Let's take a look at the final stat. Let's look at the last image in the series and see where it came to. So this is the last image that it took. It's a random depth of field, random focus point somewhere over there. Okay. And then you'll see this jump now, this 7% crop jump between what the normal singular image would be in terms of framing and then what the stacked image is. Okay. So this is our stacked image. 15 shots. We still didn't get a lot, did we? And that's the whole thing about this. You magnify massively with a telephoto compression of, you know, a 180 equivalent, and this is what you're going to get. So there's our little snail sitting on his little blue crystalline iceberg perch. What I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to do it again. Let's close it down. We'll pick a different focal point that's further through the image and see if we can, let's see if we can stack a bit more of Superman's Fortress of Solitude before we take the last few questions and end the session. That hour has disappeared. It's gone on me. Right, let's see. I'm going to start there. I'm not changing anything at all. Here we go. And go. So batteries are still pretty good. The flashes are happening fairly quickly. And there we go. Oh, Stephen's asked a great question. I'm just going to pop up here whilst we're waiting for that to create the final. Stephen Hewitt has asked, could you remind me the spec of the power bank you use for the OM1? Yeah, I use a 65 watt PD power delivery power bank by a company called Charmast. Anywhere over 25 watt will do it, but the 65 watt is a really good one. 65 watt PD compliant power bank. Okay, let's take a look at that now. Ooh, In nature, brilliant. Honestly, I could say that all night, actually. This is now, so this is our whole crystalline structure. Do you know what? Actually, what I'm going to do, let me close that down. Let me turn off bracketing. We'll take a single image to compare that back now, just so that we can really see what we're missing if we don't use focus stacking. There we go. So let's see. This is a single shot. Okay, so let's look. We've got a little bit of focus here, a little bit here. It's a bit all over the place because of the way those crystalline structures kind of intersect each other. Can't really see what's going on here. And this is that stacked shot. Look at the beautiful detail that we've managed to get in that depth now. Like I said, this is tiny. 9 millimeters of field of view is pretty much what we're seeing there. It's just cool. I mean, I could fanboy over this all night, but they'll pull me out of the live stream pretty soon, so I can't do that. So hopefully that's giving you an idea. And also, isn't it nice to take photographs in macro of something that's either not an insect or a flower? You know, somebody mentioned snowflakes. Very, very, very similar thing. Something that you might see on a lot of the channels. Snowflakes is fantastic if you get hold of them. But let's have a little quick look at the detail in here. Crikey, there we go. Isn't that marvelous? If you haven't got a 90mm macro lens, I can't recommend it enough. I mean, I know, look, I'm wearing the badge and I have to do that. Yes, my boss would be very unhappy if I didn't do that. But I genuinely can't recommend that 90 enough. However, be prepared, because things, the sort of physics aspect of macro when you get to this level are slightly different, but we're there to help you anyway. So if you do need help, then you've only got to reach out to us, and we've got tons of information out there as well. Right, let's take that away. Just me now. Sorry, folks. Right, so let's have a quick look in the chat and see what we've got left. Nice to see Lisa Kachar in there, nice and active, talking about our stuff as well, using ND filters. Lisa, great to see you. Thanks for being active in the chat there. Okay, good. So I think if you've got any more questions, you know where we are. You can add questions in the video after it's gone live. Thank you so much for watching this special for World Photography Day on Saturday. Like I said, there is tons and tons of stuff going on. We've got another day and then a whole schedule of things going on Saturday that you can get stuck into. And if you're not available on Saturday, then whenever you've got time, just sit down and rewatch it all. It's going to be there forever. Check out all aspects of our YouTube channel as well. If you go across the channels tab, if you're not familiar with YouTube, you know where we are, obviously, because you know you're watching this perhaps on YouTube or somewhere else. But have a look at the channels, because all of our fantastic ambassadors and mentors, we've listed them on there, so you get access to their channels and their great stuff as well. So without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. It's good night from here in the UK. It's very early morning for John Lord in Australia, which is now slightly past 5 a.m. We do appreciate you being in here, John, as I appreciate everybody else. I'll see you on another one soon. And if you're in one of the OMDS events, then I'll see you there on Zoom as well. So thanks, everybody. Bye-bye, and take care for now.